Ladies, gentlemen, fellow Kryptonians out there, welcome to my Superman and Lois Season 4, Episode 3 recap, review, and breakdown. And the first thing I've got to say is, can Lois, the family, get a break because of all this heartbreak that they're going through? I mean, if you couldn't tell already, this was most certainly General Lane's episode. Huge things happened in it. Jonathan. So I'm going to dive straight into it. I would love to know your own thoughts down in the comments below about, the certain way they handled things with regards to Superman's heart. That is certainly something that's fascinated me because maybe we thought it would go a different way. Among everything else, theories, you name it, go ahead, leave a like on this video if you do go on to enjoy it. I appreciate all the support on my first 2 episodes review, but let's get into this. So the beginning of the episode picks up with a very feelsy start, and it completely got me because it looked initially like the family was somewhat accepting that they can't get Clark back and that they were saying goodbye, but as we find out at the end of the episode, it was actually for General Lane. Of course, more on that later, but we pick up with Sam Lane at the DoD, and they're tackling something which, yes, very much so needs to be tackled, and that is that Doomsday is still out there and a plan needs to be made. And he mentions that he's thinking of, hey, can you maybe get me the serum that Bruno Mannheim made to bring the other Superman back to life? And I was thinking, okay, where are we going with this? Is he going to try and use that on Clark? Because that wouldn't be a great idea. And honestly, even though there are some things that I somewhat felt like were going to happen this episode, with things like this, I genuinely didn't know what they were going to do. So I was quite excited at how, they didn't make it so glaringly obvious with the little surprises that we're getting this season. And speaking about General Lane and just how this was very much so his episode, we get a flashback to the first time that Clark revealed himself to Sam, which was both hilarious because literally all he does is remove his glasses, but it's also really cool at the same time in such a comic book way. I really loved how the show in this scene embraced both of these aspects in just the dialogue with Sam not getting it up until that very final moment, but also embracing the kind of, goofiness of the comics and how it's like, yes, I'm a completely different person now. I mean, this is a comic book show. You do have to suspend your disbelief with stuff like that, of course. And again, I like how they embrace that in this moment. And also, I like how, even though we don't have Tyler Hoechlin's Clark in present day, how much they're still including Clark, because it's both feelsy, obviously, for General Lane this episode, but there's still this overshadowing feelsiness with the death of Superman, even though we know he's going to be coming back. I also loved how this just showed the more traditional Sam Lane before he changed, saying marriage isn't in the cards for him. You and I are this world's last line of defense. I kind of felt bad for Clark in this moment, but it did feel good seeing like a, let's just say, I think this was around 17 years ago flashback. And I know we got a little bit of like a headbutting thing or two with Sam Lane and Clark in the first couple of seasons, but he still was mostly changed by then. It's just really cool seeing this universe's iteration of a bit more of a hardened General Lane and stubborn, bull-headed version of him way back in the day. We also get John Henry back with Natalie this episode, and this is another example of how I thought this episode would go a bit differently in terms of how I expected from the trailer that this might be the episode that Doomsday gets taken out, and he still hasn't been taken out, which is interesting, so more theories on that a little bit later. But of course, they're initially feeling a little bit guilty about how they didn't help Clark take out Doomsday, because after all, he didn't want them to, but maybe they could have been successful if you not only had Superman there in space doing that, but also freaking missiles from Steel and Natalie's suit. But then again, with Doomsday, maybe it would have only made him stronger, which makes me all the more fascinated as to how they're still actually gonna take out Doomsday. Is it going to be a combination of Jonathan, Jordan, Steel, Natalie, and Superman's return? That's 5 pretty formidable threats. But now we need to talk about arguably the biggest thing that happened in this episode, and arguably across the seasons, because so many of us have been waiting for something like this. So after Lois publishes the article about the death of Superman, because she thinks that the world kind of needs to understand that Superman won't be there to save them anymore, we have Jonathan say, yeah, well, he would be if someone had listened. And you can completely understand, given how much caution Jonathan was stressing about the approach to get the heart to Jordan last episode, and how Jordan like impulsively handled it, why he's feeling this way, because even though it is what it is, arguably, in retrospect, there could have been a world in where they maybe could have successfully have got the heart. And that is something that is still left open-ended right now, especially with the developments this episode with General Lane's heart. I know a lot of us were entertaining, what if that actually wasn't Superman's heart last episode that Lex Luthor stepped on? Now, with these developments this episode, which we're going to get into, and you know what they are, it maybe was Superman's heart that was destroyed. If you don't know what I'm talking about, long story short here, we were thinking that would Lex really do that? Maybe he would have actually kept his real heart somewhere else. That could still be a possibility, but with the replacement heart that Superman is getting, maybe it isn't, but they could still do the thing in where he has a choice to get back his heart later on this season. Let's just say that Lex Luthor is bested, they recover it, and he's given the choice to have more of a human one. I know I'm already jumping to it, but you know me, my reviews are all over the place. So will Clark have the choice to maybe have more of a human heart versus that of a Kryptonian one? But that might not be true whatsoever, and his heart genuinely could have been destroyed. Lots of people were saying, how could his heart even be stepped on? Isn't he meant to be the Man of Steel? I don't mind that whatsoever in my comic book logic brain, if you will, with what I was applying to it. The way I saw it is that, yeah, Clark is the Man of Steel and you can't touch him, or like bullets can't pierce him, so shouldn't that apply to his organs? But, you know, if blood isn't pumping through his body and an organ is extracted, I feel like it maybe would be reduced to kind of dying tissue that wouldn't have that Kryptonian strength, you know, imbued in it. I was fine with that, even if some people weren't. But after getting sidetracked, I need to talk about what happens with Jonathan. So we have Jordan race after Jonathan, trying to talk to him about how he's feeling. And this was just such a fantastically acted scene, impeccably acted by Michael Bishop, who plays Jonathan, because he completely flies off the lid here, like spewing out all of the thoughts that he's kept in over the seasons. I mean, sure, he said it from time to time, but with obviously his father dying, he says a lot of things out of anger here. And again, I was just so impressed by just the acting in this scene. Michael Bishop is insanely talented. I was so locked in. It felt so real to me. And you know when you're locked in through being that engrossed to the point of where you forget you're watching a show, you forget the real world just through someone's performance, and you get that emotional reaction out of, you know, us as a viewer. It's just, man. And, you know, he hits the wall, and this is when his powers kick in. And the way they showed this was incredibly awesome. He was overwhelmed by his X-ray vision. The cold breath was kicking in. So how do I feel about this? Because if you've been watching me long enough, you'll know that I've kind of played both sides of the fence, in all honesty. I've been like, okay, yeah, it would be awesome if Jonathan got powers, but with the show obviously originally having meant to have got 7 seasons, I don't think we would have got this soon if it wasn't ending. So it is awesome we got them, but more on what I was just saying, I've always been okay with maybe Jonathan not manifesting powers, because it did show this interesting contrast to the brothers and how it gave an authentic story for Jonathan, feeling maybe a bit like the black sheep of the family, Jordan, you know, maybe outshining him in those ways. I mean, who wouldn't want to be the son of Superman and manifest powers? And if you don't, you know, I don't need to go over and retread story that they've already explored in this show. It makes complete sense. So I felt like that was very organic, despite the fan goggles that we all equip of wanting to be like, oh, but it would be really cool if Jonathan got powers. But since we've got them now, I'm still like that. I'm still like, well, you know, this is freaking awesome. Again, to stress, I still wouldn't have minded if he didn't get powers, but I'm not going to be one of those people to be like, oh, nah, they should have stuck with their guns. I can't deny it is badass. I mean, it's got to the point of where he was flying around the Kent farm. Lois can't believe he's flying already. He's already been to Metropolis, New Carthage, San Francisco, and he more or less has all of his powers at this point, whereas for Jordan, it kicked in over like a couple of different seasons. So now we have Jordan saying he's a natural. You can see a little bit of, I don't know if I would say jealousy, but there's this feeling of how Jordan once felt like the black sheep of the family in what they set up with those first initial arcs of season 1. And now his brother has got the powers. His brother, who was always seen as a bit more popular and socially less anxious and this, that, and the other of what they were going with back then. And it's now reverted Jordan to feeling like the black sheep of the family, especially when his brother excelled with his powers so quickly within the span of a couple of hours. I also got how Jonathan was hyped. I'm glad that they didn't overplay that. Maybe it is overhyped to some people, but I kind of view it as it's just what he needed right now. It's so validating for him after seasons of not having them. And, you know, going from the black sheep of the family to then now, if anything, feeling maybe even closer to his father in the very time he's lost him through having that Kryptonian heritage. Even if they weren't planning on doing it in season 4 originally over the 7-season plan, maybe they would have still got there. And I don't feel like it isn't earned just because we've got them now, because this is still 4 seasons of people and fans wanting to see him manifest his powers. So I felt like it was going to feel awesome no matter what if you're a fan of Jonathan's character, especially as in some scenes later on, like he acknowledges that he doesn't need a superhero suit right now. He's more than willing and happy to learn the long way. He just genuinely wants to go out there and help people, but he's okay to take it at a slow pace. But one thing that I didn't expect with Luthor this episode, or should I say so soon, is that this is when we got that scene of Lex walking up to Jordan in the Kent barn to use his freaking secret weapon to turn the boys, or Jordan, against Lois, to do the very thing that kind of Lois did to Luthor, even though I think, again, we're going to find out that there's other reasons why Elizabeth doesn't want anything to do with her father. And that, of course, goes back to how Lois chose one of her sons to live last episode when being faced to, you know, if you don't choose one, both of them will die. Now, I was wrong because I thought she would choose Jordan, just because I felt like they were going to do the whole black sheep thing more with Jonathan, because that's been his story arc for quite a few seasons, even though it's gone up and down. I felt like it would have been like another reinforcing crush for Jonathan. But a lot of you guys were right in how she chose Jordan. And it does make kind of, even though it's like a terrible thing to just even talk about and contemplate, it does kind of make more sense, because if anybody would survive over both of the boys, it would be Jordan, the one with powers. You might choose him as well, just because, again, it's a horrible thing to even try and justify in a conversation, but if something were to happen to any of the boys, you might want the one who could possibly go on to save the world like Superman to be the one who lives. So with everything already building up for Jordan this episode, with Jonathan getting powers and feeling outshined, for Lex to be like, you think she has a favorite, and drop this bomb on him, especially with Jordan's character in general, and just even being a son and learning this, even if you know that your mom had no choice, it is nonetheless a very complex situation to unfold that I feel like they handled really, really well. Lois even gave a bit of a similar justification as to what everyone else did, and how, you know, you have powers. I didn't know Jonathan was safe at the time, but then you can't really blame Jordan for saying, but would that have mattered because of the insecurity of knowing that you weren't picked? Again, I think it was handled pretty well. I'm glad that they didn't do the typical kind of drama thing of going even further with it, with Jordan going rogue and, you know, cozying up to Lex Luthor and just being like, screw my mum. Like, that would have just been the kind of typical eye roll thing in like a network drama show, but they didn't do that. Do you know what I mean? I think they handled it pretty as organically as they could have done, while also really furthering something that I'm really enjoying and what I really feel like they're handling so well this season already in just 3 episodes, and that is Luthor's master plan. Like, he's attacking from multiple different fronts. Like, he's going after Superman. He's successfully done that. He's trying to find his daughter, but he's also got to completely dismantle Lois Lane's life. Now, meanwhile, with General Lane, who's kind of looking at the little serum, he's confronted by Janelle Jones, I believe it was, because Luthor's threatening his family, demanding to know where Elizabeth is. Luthor is threatening to send Doomsday in, and the only nitpick I have for things like this, I don't even know if I would classify it as a nitpick, that there would be CCTV recording of this moment in this room, highly likely, right? That would show evidence that there is Lex Luthor's voice coming out of that phone saying that he's threatening, like, General Lane in this moment. He's got this soldier to turn on Lane and shoot him and send Doomsday in. I feel like that's enough to arrest Lex Luthor or start an investigation. Sure, there might be some holes in it that Luthor could be like, that wasn't my voice. This was like a AI thing, a deep fake. But you get what I'm saying. There's little things that like this that occur to me, because this is the DOD. Like, they could trace that call. They could find out where that call came from. There'd be video. Do you know what I mean? But tossing that aside, we have Sam Lane try and disarm Jones, and he gets shot. And again, it didn't surprise me, but I was still thoroughly emotional throughout this episode, despite kind of knowing where this was going to go. But still, as much as I am saying that, there were still things that I didn't know they were going to do. Such as when he got shot in this moment, he injected himself, and with that seed that they deliberately planted earlier with Hardcastle saying, oh, well, you know, Sam Lane could be creating another monster to fight Doomsday. I was thinking, yeah, that'd be pretty stupid, because, like, sure, you could create a monster, but then you'd still have a monster left, so are they really going to do that? But then he injected himself, and I was like, oh man, are they really going with the thing where he injects himself, becomes a monster himself, but still is Sam Lane enough to, like, go up against Doomsday? But then I asked myself, how would that work? What I mean by that is, we can't forget how Lex Luthor had to completely over and over and over again torture Bizarro Superman, kill him and kill him and kill him, to become formidable enough to become Doomsday. So I was like, are they just going to bypass all of that and really do that with Sam Lane? But it turns out that wasn't the case at all. So Doomsday arrives at the DOD, and this is where we get another flashback to right before Lois got married with Sam, accepting her decision. I do want to stress, though, they've done this once before. I believe it was in episode 1. There was that little exchange there as Doomsday landed, in where it's like he recognizes his former wife, even as a beast. It's important to remember that this was the Bizarro Superman. I know he's more beast than man now, but they've definitely done, like, you see Lois looking at him almost with like a bit of, I don't know, compassion or something, and you see that Doomsday almost takes a second. So I don't know if that's going to be something they do something with later on down the line, in how we could have Doomsday turn back on Lex Luthor, and how Lois might somehow get through to the Beast in a bit of a Beauty and the Beast kind of way. And then we get like another death of Superman moment, but the death of General Lane, with how General Lane's neck gets snapped in this moment. And again, I just want to sing frickin' Dylan Walsh's praises. He's been a fantastic General Lane. This whole episode was really well handled. I would say the way they structured it with the flashbacks, the feelsy moments, just all of it. It was just such a nice kind of monument to Superman and Lois's Sam Lane. And also, like, it was just heartbreaking seeing Lois scream in such pain in this moment after not only losing her husband, but now her father before her very eyes. I have to admit, like, a part of me was still thinking, oh god, are they really gonna kind of ruin this moment through just having him come back to life, since he was injected with that serum? But this is where we learn the thing that really subverted my expectations, and how Steele revealed that they're going to use General Lane's heart to bring back Superman. And he explains to Lara that he was injected with the serum that contains Superman's blood, and Lara was like, but bruh, that's not the same thing though. Like, and I have to admit, I was kind of thinking, like, do I like this? I don't know. Don't get me wrong, I do think there's something poetic about how General Lane's heart is being given to Superman, you know, with the context of the flashback scenes and how he's going to be there, just like how he said in that message, with every heartbeat that Clark has in the future. But I do think that maybe the fan theory was just maybe a better way of executing it, and I would love to know your thoughts on this, because we had Lara reveal that the procedure would be quick, but if Clark would return, it would take many days. And even then, she has concerns. And I was thinking, I mean, well, yeah, like he will have like a 60-something-year-old heart in him. But what I think she really means is that, you know, with a human heart in him, he's going to be maybe depowered. He might age a bit more like a human, that is, something like that. And the boys will take over. And this is what I meant with regards to where, you know, the legacy part of how this whole series will close will kind of end up going. I think he will still be Superman, but he'll be greatly kind of maybe depowered, or like just have some kind of side effect like that, which, you know, only makes sense considering that this is so far into Superman's career and you have both of his boys having manifested powers now. But again, back to my I don't know how to feel about this thing. The fan theory, I don't think this is a result of me like having expectations of the fan theory being true. I'm just like evaluating both ways of executing it. Now, what is this fan theory, you may be asking? And that is that if they bested Doomsday before Clark returned back, which I do admit, how were they ever going to do it? I don't know. I really don't know. But the idea was that if they somehow used Doomsday's heart to go back into Superman, it just made perfect sense because he was Clark Kent, Bizarro Superman. So if there's ever kind of a perfect heart, even though it's like the reverse Bizarro heart, that would make more sense rather than using, you know, kind of old man General Lane's heart. And there were nitpicks in me that I think I'll suspend my disbelief for, like, you know, with heart transplants, you need to have a matching heart, otherwise the body will reject it. So would General Lane's even be compatible with Clark's? But then I thought Lara's probably just gonna use some Kryptonian technology to just make it compatible kind of thing. So I was like, okay, you know, I guess there's that. But I would love to know your theories. Obviously, I don't know at all. What do you think this will mean for Clark having returned back to life, having a human heart, a much older heart as well, one that, you know, is also going to be in a body of a Kryptonian that could be overworked, you know, because you have to assume a Kryptonian has a Kryptonian heart that beats 3 times rather than twice, because it needs to keep up. Like, so I'm now wondering, will Clark only have like a certain amount of time left compared to just like a long natural human life? There's all of these ideas that I'm thinking, but I don't know if they would just bring back Clark for him to be like, yeah, he's only got like, what, maybe 12 years left? Or maybe he can't exercise his powers as much, because if he does, his heart is at risk of having a heart attack. There could be all kinds of considerations like this which come in. But again, I think I would be okay with that ultimately, because the boys are meant to be taking over in the future, and that's where they're going most likely. But a question I also have for you guys is, even if this didn't go the way maybe you wanted it to, would you have really wanted Doomsday to be bested without Superman? Because that feels almost too hard to believe at the same time. And at least this way, you know, coming full circle on processing my own thoughts on this, there is a poetic aspect to it. Like, General Lane's passed away, he's gone out like an absolute badass, and he, you know, effectively, literally gives his heart to Superman. And that is a nice story. It even goes back to like the line he said in the flashback, like, you and I are the last line of defense for this world. And that is going to be true in present day. He, you know, Superman is going to be alive again, and he's going to have the literal heart of General Lane. Both together, they will be one of the last lines of defense alongside Superman's sons. Now, I'm guessing the next episode may have a bit of a time skip, just because Lara said it would take many days, and at the end of the episode, we pan to Clark waking up. I just assume that's going to be the case, and it's not like they've not done that before. They've actually even gone by like a couple of months before, if you remember when Clark went to the Bizarro Earth and time went so fast compared to what he experienced in the Bizarro world. But by the end of this episode, I know I'm saying again here, but this has just made things so much more messy. Like, Luthor and Lois, like this war that is happening, he is now responsible, even if he didn't necessarily intend for this to happen, even though he was completely willing to go there. You know, he's responsible for General Lane's death and her husband's death. It doesn't even matter that Clark is coming back. He still caused this pain to the family. I really like how, big and grand they're going with Lex's plans here. And this, is still far from over. Like, where are things going to go next episode? The episode after that? The episode after that? But overall, guys, another great episode. I really, really enjoyed it. I think it was really important to do this with General Lane's character. Didn't necessarily go the way I expected, but after thinking on it more and more and just speaking out loud in this review, I do see why they went with his heart rather than Doomsday's. And overall, it's just left us, wondering about some really interesting things about the future with what that heart will mean for Superman and various other directions and teasers. And also, how is Clark gonna feel about this with Lex Luthor once he's back? Like, he's gonna have such a bone to pick with Luthor. Let me know your thoughts on this episode. Let me know your thoughts on just the way things went down, with the way I kind of tried to explore different takes and the ways that they could have done it. And let me know any theories for episode 4. What you think this means for Jonathan, the Lex, Superman, all of these revelations we got this episode. But I'm going to shut up now. So if you got this far in a video, we greatly appreciate a like. Do consider subscribing for more videos just like this. But I am going to love you and leave you. So again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day. And I'll see you fellow Kryptonians in the next video. Goodbye.